let's sew together the Yarn Adventure Blanket squares along the side, so the start and ends of the rows. And we're going to use mattress stitch along the back, and we're going to use a darning needle and our yarn ends. Now, I will come back and do this later with this yarn end, this one here. But just so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to use a different coloured thread. So I'm just going to thread the needle first. And how I thread needles is I hold the yarn in one hand, and with the other hand and the eye of the needle, I make a loop. I suppose I push the needle up and make a loop with the yarn around the needle, and then have that on my finger. And then I flatten that loop out. As I'm flattening it out, I push the eye of the needle down over the end. So I force the end out the eye of the needle. And this yarn is a bit splitty, especially close to the end. So I'll try that again. So flatten the end of the loop and push the eye down over the end of the loop. Look at that. And that forces it through the eye of the needle. Just pull that out. Pull that out. Okay, and I am ready. So first thing, like I said in the last video, is we're going to do a loop around the outside of these two stitches, the two corner stitches, so we create a nice solid line along the outside of the blanket, because we're not going to do a border around it. Okay, power just dropped out then, so we'll keep going. The beeping was the UPS, the battery backup for the computer, what I'm recording to. Okay, anyhow, so we're going, first we do a loop around here, around the two corners, just so we get this nice continuous straight edge of the blanket, and it will make sure there's no gap. So remember, I'm pretending I'm using this bit of yarn here. So I'm going to go from, okay, if I'm going that one, I'm going to go through the V on the bottom here. Doesn't need to be through that V, but just anywhere right on the corner of the square. Pull that through, and I'll leave an end here so I can. Normally I would sew this end in later, the white one, but I'm going to pull it out and redo this join with the blue end, and then loop it down. I'll loop it down through the other corner. So I'm attaching the two corners together right on the outside. Okay, and so now I'm going to go with the needle. I'm doing mattress stitch. I'm going to go under a loop on this side, going away from the join, and then at the same end of the same row on the opposite side of the join, I'm going to go from the center again, going out through a loop on this side, and doing that, so that way and then that way. And what I found is I actually pass the needle to the other hand, and it becomes quite a fluid motion like that. And we're going under one loop on this at the end of each row. So remember when we did these squares that these indenty lines all up, which is formed by the double crochet UK, single crochet US. It's formed by just the shaping of the stitches. And so each of these lines, indenty line things, has two rows between it. So it's putting the needle under two loops at the end of each row. And it doesn't matter which one you do, just look for something that's on this side. This is the back, we're calling it the back side. Because that will put the stitch on this side and make the front side of the blanket invisible. Doesn't matter which loop, just do one at the end of each row, somewhere near the edge. So I'm just going to choose that one first. So I'm doing the needle from the join out towards the square that the loop is on. And then just pull that through. Excuse me. I recommend doing this somewhere where you can keep the square nice and flat and level. So like on a table like I'm doing. because it just means that you can check that you're not pulling the yarn too tight or even too loose when you're doing the stitches. So if we do the stitches too tight, this is going to get, the two sides are going to get bunchy and they're not going to sit flat. Whereas if we've got it here laid out flat on the table, we can see that it's nice and flat. The squares are looking fabulous as we're doing the join. And so what I do, I put the needle through the loop and I just give it a tiny pull just until it just closes up the gap. Yep. And then do the same thing on the other side through the loop. And then give it a tiny pull, just nice and gently, just to close up the gap. And then I look, okay, so that was my last, the last loop I went under was on that row, so I'll do one on this row next. And see how I'm putting my finger on it just to hold it down while I pull it up? I didn't realize I was doing that until just now. But you might find your own way that feels natural for you. I found for me, when I start doing this, it feels a little bit awkward and odd, but it doesn't take long. And I get into the motion and the movements. And it starts to feel rhythmic and almost meditative because it's nice and soothing. I've done that one, so I do a loop on up here. And if for whatever reason you find that you get to the end and the two squares aren't quite lining up, just kind of do an extra little stitch on one side just to even things out. It is forgiving. So like that. So that's how to do it. And it's just the same thing all the way up. And so you can see, because I've used a different coloured yarn, you can see the join through that. But if you imagine if I used orange or blue yarn, that would just tie in. And you can also see there's an extra, this bit of orange is sticking out a bit differently. I went through a different loop over here to what I'd been doing either side. So if you can put the needle under the similar loops at the end of each row, it will make that look more consistent. Otherwise, it's not a biggie. It doesn't look terrible. If I turn that over to the front side, you can see, or you can't see, there's no white sticking through there at all, apart from this, but that gets sewn in later. So you can see it's nice and hidden, and on the front side of the blanket, it's a nice invisible join where the two squares just butt up against each other.